Bonjour French 1. Today's lesson is all about asking somebody about the activities that they do and telling about the activities that you do and giving some more details as to which activities and when you do them. This is kind of a different set of notes. You can just notice from the setup and the physical look of the paper that it's a little bit different. So on the left-hand side is the front page of the notes, and on the right-hand side is whenever you open up to the inside a possible answer for that question. Now, one thing I have to say right off the bat is these are not the only answers for these questions, and they're not the only questions you can ask. A lot of times you'll see things underlined in the questions or the answers. When something is underlined, it's underlined so that you know that you don't have to necessarily use that exact sport or that exact answer. And some of these answers will work for more than one of the questions. So again, really look at what the meaning of these sentences and phrases are and realize that the translation will help clue you in as to whether or not you can use them in different situations other than what I have on this page. Also keep in mind that I tried to make really clear what you should be writing on your paper by putting a blue box around it. I know this is kind of a weird looking notes page, so if you see a blue box around it, that's what you're supposed to be writing on your actual paper. So let's start with, do you play sports? Which is literally just tu fais du sport, but remember this est-ce que business is a way of making it very clear that what you're asking is a question. You know, in French, if you don't put est-ce que, you have to raise your voice at the end of the sentence and sound kind of silly and say, tu fais du sport? But the way you get around that is you put an est-ce que in front of it. It doesn't change the meaning of the sentence at all. It's still, you play sports, but when you put est-ce que at the beginning, you don't quite have to raise your voice as much, because as a French person hears that, they automatically realize that est-ce que tells me from the beginning of the sentence what I'm about to hear is a question. So again, I will pause, of course, and give you some time to repeat. If you want to ask somebody, do you play sports? You say, est-ce que tu fais du sport? Now, if you open up to the inside of your notes, one possible answer for that, of course, if you play sports, this is not going to be your answer, is the phrase, non, je ne fais pas de sport, which is, no, I don't do sports. Now, of course, if you do sports, then you're actually going to say something a little bit different, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But if you do not do sports, there's your response. All right, flip back to the front again. We're back over here. Next question, if you want to ask specifically about a specific sport or activity, such as do you play, in this case I used basketball, but again it's underlined so you could use any sport at all. It's still the same kind of question. Instead of do, it's do you play. So it's still the same kind of est-ce que setup, but it's using the verb play instead. Est-ce que tu joues au basket? Now again, if you do actually play basketball, sorry about that, your answer is going to look a little bit different than this one, but this is one way of saying no, that you don't do a sport. The way you say you don't play a sport is you put ne pas around your word play, and you say non, je ne joue pas au basket. Don't worry, I promise you we'll get some yes answers here in just a moment. Now, if somebody is kind of being ornery like this, and you say, well, do you do sports? And they say, no, I don't play sports. And you say, what about basketball? Do you play basketball? No, I don't play basketball. Well, what do you do? Qu'est-ce que tu fais comme sport is literally, well, what sports do you do? Which I know from this first question, you should probably be understanding that this person clearly is not an athlete, but let's get some yes answers in here. If you ever do want to say that you play a sport, you got some yes answers coming up. So first things first, the open-ended question, not just do you do sports, but what sports do you do? The only difference is really this QU that's in front of the est-ce que. Qu'est-ce que, whenever you put the QU in front of it, actually means what. So if you want to say, well, what sports do you do? Qu'est-ce que tu fais comme sport? And if somebody wants to say that they play a certain sport, in this case I use hockey, we have je joue au hockey. Another typical question that you might want to ask somebody is you might want to ask them, well, okay, if you don't do sports, well, what do you do for fun? So flip back to the front again. Instead of saying, what do you do for a sport, comme sport, this is the exact same question, except now we have pour t'amuser. T'amuser is to have fun or to amuse yourself, right? So again, the whole question for, well, okay, if you're not really necessarily into sports or whatever, qu'est-ce que tu fais pour t'amuser? Is, well, what do you do for fun then? Now, the only difference between these two sentences is, whenever we learned our activities, we learned that some of the activities use jouer because you play that activity or sport. Some of the activities use faire because you do that activity or sport. So the only difference here is the difference between a faire sentence and a jouer sentence or activity. Same thing up here. The only difference between these two is the difference between saying I don't play versus I don't do. It really just comes down to what activity you're using and whether that activity uses jouer or faire with its activity. So if you do want to say that you do something and it's one of those activities that uses faire, such as faire du skate, to do skateboarding, you would say je fais du skate, which is I do skateboarding for fun. All right, let's get the bottom half of this chart going. So let's say that somebody says something about, hey, I do skateboarding, and you're thinking, hey, that would be a really fun thing to do together. We're going to eventually learn how to officially invite somebody on a date, or not in a romantical sense, but to hang out. But for the beginning, we're just going to kind of get started with a few of these kinds of questions. If you want to ask somebody, what are you doing on a particular day of the week? Like now that we've discussed our interests and I realize we have something in common, I want to know, qu'est-ce que tu fais samedi? What are you doing on Saturday? If you don't have anything to do, you could say, je ne fais rien. Rien is literally nothing, so I'm doing nothing, as in I'm not doing anything. If perhaps somebody wanted to say that they are doing something, you could use one of those phrases from the previous page as far as je fais du skate, I'm going skateboarding, or je joue au basket, I'm playing basketball, or something like that. Another common question, and actually here, let me adjust this just a wee bit. Sorry here. Let's see. Scooch this page over just a little bit so you can see these phrases. If you wanted to say something like, well, okay, when do you do something? Like if you were talking about, again, the skateboarding thing. Well, when do you actually get around to skateboarding? Or in this case, I switched it up to jogging. Quand est-ce que tu fais du jogging? This word quand means when, and I think we've mentioned it once or twice before, but this means when do you do jogging. Now, there's all kinds of answers for when you do jogging. You can do jogging on Tuesdays. You can do jogging at soccer practice. You can do jogging at 3 o'clock every day. This is just one potential answer since we are working with seasons and months of the year. Je fais du jogging en automne. I do jogging in the fall. But again, things are underlined there because there are so many different ways of answering a when do you do this kind of question. Another kind of question, instead of saying when, maybe you want to ask what season, as in what's baseball season, what season do you do your soccer in, things like that. The way you say in which season is en quelle saison. So if you want to say something like, I switched it up again, this is biking, but again it's underlined so you can do anything you want to here. En quelle saison tu fais du vélo? You'd be asking, well, what season do you typically bike in? You could answer again. Now, if they ask you about a season, en quelle saison, you do actually have to say a season here. You're going to sound silly to say, I bike on Tuesdays, because Tuesday is not a season. But you can say, je fais du vélo au printemps, which means I do biking in the springtime. And finally, just in case we haven't had enough interruptions, if you want to ask during what months, because let's face it, your book's excited that they have taught you the months of the year as well. A very specific during which months question would be tu fais du basket, should technically be tu joues au basket, but pendant quel mois? Pendant quel mois is during which months. And again, if they ask you specifically during which months, you have to answer by giving a month. Je fais du basket, or je joue au basket en juillet, in July. These definitely get more specific as far as once you found something that somebody likes, asking, well, when they're doing those activities. Like I said before, eventually we will learn how to invite them along with you so that you can hang out with somebody and actually set up some sort of a date or an opportunity to hang out with them. But for now, we're just trying to get more information about what they do outside of school for fun. Make sure you bring this paper with you. I know it doesn't look like a traditional notes page, but we will use a lot in class to help formulate some sentences and get some more complex answers in French.